Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to a new series that I'm calling No Metal Monday. I say, wait a minute, this is the Larry the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. Well, I thought it would be fun to have a show where I talk about some of the music that I listen to outside of the rock, hard rock, and metal world, because honestly, I listen to a lot of different things, and I have a feeling that everybody out there is like me. We're all lovers of rock and metal and hard rock. But there's other things that we listen to also, so I thought it would be fun to have a show where I explore some of those things. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Miles Davis and his album Bitches Brew. This is a gatefold vinyl record. A lot of people consider this to be the birth of fusion jazz, the birth of like jazz rock. Because up until this point, this album was released on March 30th, 1970. And up until this point, jazz was very traditional in the sense that it didn't use electric instruments. But the late 60s with Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and sort of the rise of the electric guitar, I think Miles wanted to embrace these things. And he started moving in this more jazz rock fusion kind of direction. With like his album In a Silent Way, where he started using electric instruments, but he really sort of goes all in with this record, and it's a very experimental record. Not only with the sounds that he's using, but with the style that he's playing here. It's very open and free, meaning that there aren't really chord progressions. There's no like melodies that you would necessarily hum along to. It's really about open form kind of improvisation off of rhythms, or maybe a basic chord or a basic like bass pattern. Miles experiments with some sounds in the studio. Now, for those who may not know, Miles Davis is a trumpet player, one of the leading, biggest like trumpet players of the jazz movement, and he was always somebody that was exploring different styles and was sort of pushing jazz in different directions. And at the time this was released, it was viewed as like a very like controversial thing, like, oh my gosh, this is so out there with the instruments, with the recording technique, with the way they're just sort of improvising as a group, where there's no real melodies and there's no swing jazz beats per se on this. It's more like rhythmic and funk and different tribal type rhythms and stuff like that. So it really, really threw people off. And it is the album in a lot of ways that did sort of kind of started bringing together jazz and rock. Miles always said that he wanted to do something with Jimi Hendrix, for instance. And if Jimi Hendrix had lived longer, they probably would have done something together. So you got Miles on trumpet here. There's a ton of musicians that play on this album. Almost every song has like different people involved. Just a few of the people involved in this record and a lot of these would go on to start their own groups. For instance, Wayne Zauenful, he is a keyboard player, and he would go on to form Weather Report, one of the biggest like fusion, I almost said metal, I'm so used to saying metal, one of the biggest fusion jazz bands of the 70s. Jaco Pastorius played bass with Weather Report. Chick Corea is on here. Chick Corea will go on to do Return to Forever, which was a very kind of hard rock / jazz fusion type of project. John McLaughlin plays guitar on here. He would later join Manu Vishnu Orchestra. Harvey Brooks plays bass on here on one of the tracks, I believe, and he played on the Doors' Soft Parade. Lenny White was a drummer that was on here that was also with Return to Forever. Billy Cobham played drums on here. He would release a solo album called Spectrum that had Tommy Bolin playing guitar on it, very much like kind of a rock jazz fusion type thing. So there's just all kinds of like, this album just gave birth to like a whole bunch of different bands, especially in the, like I said, in the fusion, jazz fusion, kind of combining these elements of electric guitars, electric bass, jazz, and rock. Because like I said before this, jazz groups were typically either big bands or small groups, trios, quartets and stuff, acoustic bass, acoustic instruments, acoustic pianos. And Miles really goes all in here on the exploration side of things. Now, this is not an easy record if you've never experienced music like this, which is very free form, very open-ended. Again, there's no melodies to sing along to, really. There's no like chord progressions that you can sort of lock into. It's a double record. And I would honestly advise people to start with the second record on here. And we're going to get to that. But the record opens with, and they're very long songs too. Like the first record, there's one song on side one, Pharaoh's Dance, and one song on side two, Bitches, the title track, Bitches Brew. Pharaoh's Dance has this repetitive, steady kind of drum beat. It's almost a rock, almost slightly funky kind of drum beat that goes through it. It's going to sound cacophonous at times where everybody's playing all together at the same times, and other times it drops down and gets really like quiet, and there's just different little sounds going on, and the guys can sort of reacting off of each other with little lines and themes and everything, but it's very much sort of a free-for-all. If you've never heard stuff like this before, it's just going to sound like people are just playing whatever, like there's no structure to it. In a lot of ways, it kind of is. When Miles went into this record, he didn't have write out music charts and music for everybody to follow along to. He had just basic, simple kind of things like, we're going to just play this chord, this is going to be the rhythm, and we're just going to react to each other live right here in the room. And in a lot of ways, it really works. This is an album that if you sit down, sit back, it's very trippy, it's very psychedelic. There's also that element in this too, kind of like a trippy psych late 60s thing to it. It's very much, you can immerse yourself in this record and just sort of get taken to other worlds, if you will. I think the cover is a really good example of that. It is sort of psychedelic, taking you to another sonic universe type of thing. And it can't be understated that at the time, nobody was really doing anything like this, especially in the jazz world. I mean, maybe Frank Zappa experimented with this sort of open-ended, free-form improvisation type of thing. But so Pharaoh's Dance opened up all of side one. It's just a lot of stuff going on. It moves up and down in the dynamics. Side two of the first record is Bitches Brew. It's got another kind of like free form intro where everybody's just sounds like there's just stuff going on. There's this low kind of keyboard note repeated line that returns a couple times through this particular one that sort of grounds it together, gives it some shape and form. Miles at the beginning is playing these like, he's got this like reverb and echo on his trumpet, and he's doing like these blasts, down, and, running these lines, and they're just sort of like blasting out into the reverb and everything. It's really crazy. Miles pushing like the trumpet up into its upper range, or playing like the lower notes, really high notes, just sort of jumping around. But again, there's no real like licks or anything that your ear locks into. He's just playing like these small little fragments and figures. There's hypnotic bass part starts coming in. You can even hear at points in this song, in Bitches Brew, where you can hear Miles actually talking to the band, like, okay, do this, go here, or listen to this, or whatever. If you listen closely, you can. That's how open-ended it was, that he was literally sort of directing this as it was happening. Okay, the second record is where, if you're coming from the world of rock or metal and you've never experienced stuff like this before, I would advise actually starting with the second record, side 3, with this, which is a song called Spanish Key. It has a rock groove to it, so it's that sort of make it a little more accessible for rock fans if you're just getting into this. Has a kind of a pretty aggressive, driving, repetitive bass line. There's some funky congas in it. There's an electric guitar solo in it. Also on, I believe it's on this side too, or is this on the next side? Yes, on this side, there's a song called John McLaughlin. I mentioned that John McLaughlin plays guitar in here. There's a song called John McLaughlin, which is the shortest one on here. I think like it's only like 5 or 7 minutes, which is really short compared to where all these other songs are at. So that's sort of an easy to digest one. Side 2 of the second record opens with Miles Runs the Voodoo Down. This is another one that I would recommend for people, Spanish Key, and this one probably the most accessible because this one has kind of a laid back, funky groove, and Miles is playing like kind of blues figures over the top. You can kind of wrap your ears around him. There's some chromatic stuff that he plays and everything, but really you can hear like some actual blues licks in it. So it gives your ears something to sort of lock onto. Whereas side 1 of this record with Bitches Brew and Pharaoh's Dance, it's so chaotic at times and there's so much stuff going on, it's really hard for your ear to lock in on anything. And then the last song on the record, Sanctuary, it's like a trippy psychedelic like ballad, very open-ended. There isn't really any steady rhythm going on underneath it. It's just very relaxed and very open with some nice trumpet playing too. So that one's pretty accessible. So, all right. So there you go. This is my No Metal Monday. The first episode, I'm starting with Miles Davis and his seminal, very important, groundbreaking album, Bitches Brew. Anybody else out there familiar with this record or like this record? Let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't heard it, I can make a connection to like Hawkwind. If you like Hawkwind and have never heard this, you might dig this. So, check this out. Maybe start with the second record. Like I said, Spanish Key and Miles Runs the Voodoo Down. If you're just looking for one or two songs to check out, check those out first. They're a little bit easier to wrap your ear around those. Okay, let me know what you think of that. Let me know some other suggestions, maybe some styles of music you would like me to talk about. Like I'm going to be doing some classical stuff. I listen to a lot of classical. There's some other jazz fusion stuff. I almost did the Montevishnu Orchestra Intermounting Flame. I was going to make that my first video, but I thought, let's go all the way back to Miles and Bitches Brew because it kind of gave birth to that stuff. I'm also going to be talking about some 80s stuff too, like some more poppy 80s stuff that I do really like, some dark wave stuff and electronic stuff. So I think this is going to be fun. I hope that people keep your ears, keep your minds open. If you got any suggestions for some styles of music or some artists that's outside of the rock, hard rock, metal realm that you might want me to talk about, let me know in the comments down below, okay? And until we see you again, I guess I got to come up with a new slogan for this because I don't want you to rock hard, ride free for this episode, or no, stay heavy, stay metal. How about just let's keep our ears open and keep exploring.